Corbolic V2. This is a super safe and effective natural anabolic. Not only is this product going to help you increase protein synthesis, which basically means muscle recovery and growth, it also may inhibit myostatin, which is a protein in your body that is known to inhibit muscle growth. This is a complete natural anabolic that works through multiple different pathways, has multiple trademarked ingredients. If you are a natural athlete looking for that edge, Corbolic V2 is what you need. Get yourself some.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Pro Physique Code. Evan, Lexi, and I, we're going to break it down for you guys and talk about one of the challenges of prep, and that is sticking to the plan, cheating on the diet, cheating on the training, cheating on, the process itself. And, what does that mean? Is it good? Is it, we're going to talk about the psychology. We'll talk about the physiology. We'll define it a little bit, and we'll talk about, things that the three of us have noticed that can help you avoid issues in prep. Probably the most common things that create kind of eating disorder behaviors or eating disorder thinking, negative food associations, things like that. And I think, this is a question that's kind of been building from previous podcasts. We've been seeing this, right, Lexi? Like that's kind of where it comes from.
Yeah, we kind of loosely and vaguely alluded to, like, we answered this question in our last week episode because it was kind of a Q&A. But I think we all kind of agreed that we could go so much more into depth on this topic. And I mean, I don't recall there being like, I can't think of a podcast episode I've come across out there that's like specifically talked about what to do if you cheat in prep, does it happen, etc. So we're going to talk about that today.
Yeah, I think it's a great topic too, because I mean, people just assume if you're in bodybuilding, like you're locked into it, you're not going to cheat, you're not going to fall off plan. Well, in a perfect world, yes, that is the case with it, but that's not always reality. Like it's something that everyone struggles with. Some people give into it and some people don't, especially if you're talking about the food side of it. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. And if you have those feelings and thoughts, like you're not weird. It doesn't make you mentally weak or anything like that. And I think that's why a lot of people fall off to it is they feel like they shouldn't have these thoughts. They shouldn't have these feelings and they're wrong for having them.
Yeah, and that's why I think we're going to talk about this today. Because hopefully by listening to this, I think people will be like, wow, okay, wow, I'm not like this does happen to other people. Yeah, so we're gonna dive into it all in this episode.
Yeah. So the first thing, let's define cheating. Let's define binging. Let's define what these terms mean. So that if you have gone through this, it helps to feel like not alone, because it's a very powerless feeling. I don't know if either of you have dealt with it, but I definitely had a couple moments in a few of my preps where I was like, I really don't even want to be eating this, but I can't stop. And that's a very powerless feeling. So cheating, I think the definition of cheating, you guys can tell me if you agree, is just basically like you have a plan, whether that's to do your cardio, to hit your macros, to eat your meals, and something causes you to not follow it. Like, okay, I did not follow my plan. For bodybuilders, we're almost like in a weird way, like monks. Like we create very hard lines in the sand. And I think that's where I mean, that can be problematic, but for some people it can be necessary. But I think to me, that's like cheating. If I say, hey, I'm going to hit 200 carbs today, and at the end of the day, I'm like, you know what? F it. I'm hitting 300 carbs. Okay, I cheated. Now what? Type of thing.
Yeah, I think cheating is the conscious thought of doing it, being when you know you should be doing or shouldn't be doing something and you
Yeah.
do it anyways. I think that's it. That what I would define as is cheating is sometimes things aren't going to be optimal, right? Like I've been on prep and I've had my meals. I got stuck in the airport. Things got delayed. I did the best I could to make it work. And maybe I was a little over, maybe I was a little under, but that wasn't cheating. I was trying to make the best out of a bad situation. So I look at cheating as when you know you should be doing something and you consciously make that decision to not do it.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that because I've had a couple instances where I'll have clients like early on in prep come to me and they're all panicked. They're like, oh my God, I was tracking this and I accidentally was tracking it wrong. But
I
theoretically.
tracked it wrong. I did it wrong. I read it wrong. Something
Right,
like that.
right. But that's not the conscious, like you did not consciously make that decision, right? So I would agree. I think the cheating is that conscious deviation from the plan.
So let's define what a binge is.
Yeah, I think this is definitely an important one to define too, because like something also like I feel like I hear this term all the time. People are always like, "Oh, I binged," and I think some people don't really realize what a true binge is because it's not just the simple
Right.
act of like overeating a little bit. Like it's essentially like I actually just pulled up the definition. It's when you eat a large amount of food in a short amount of time and you feel you can't control what or how much you are eating. So I think it's for some people, though, like if you've ever had a true binge, which I know I have, like in high school, I struggled with that. It's more of a like it's an outer body experience. Like you almost feel like you are not yourself in the midst of it and you can't control the amount you're eating. Like you feel like you can't stop. Like it's like that outer body experience and it's not really that conscious act of overeating.
Yeah. Having seconds, having thirds at a holiday, or having an extra piece of pizza, that is not binge eating. Binge eating is associated with shame, embarrassment, lack of feelings of control.
Mhm.
Um, I've had with clients that were dealing with binge eating, they were hiding to eat. And so instead of eating in front of other people, they would eat in their car, they would eat in the pantry, they wouldn't bring food home, they would have it hidden. Um, so yeah, to me, binge eating is that's if you truly are having an issue with binge eating, that is not something that me, Evan, Lexi, or a coach from Pro Physique other than Danica are qualified to discuss with you, because that is not physical, that's psychological.
Yeah.
Now, I think there's a difference between binge eating disorder and binge eating behavior associated with competing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's like a temporary, because you do have some physiological cues that are going to make it more likely, and there's also some styles of prep that make it more likely. So we can talk about like things that, we've seen and done, but let's talk a little bit about personal experience because,
Mhm.
I've, I've a few occasions been like, man, I did not want to eat all that food. And I felt like, okay, that was weird. Have you guys ever like binge ate to the point where you were like either shocked for what was happening or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty open about the fact this was before my bodybuilding years, but like before I went to college, because truth be told, like what kind of quote unquote healed this issue for me was moving into my college dorm room and like living with two other girls 24/7. Like I couldn't do that closet eating anymore. But I do vividly remember in high school, there was this time where I think it was actually Thanksgiving, believe it or not. And I remember coming home. My family was like spending the night somewhere else. And I actually came home because I had to work the next morning for Black Friday. And I remember coming home, I had the whole house to myself. And that was like the one moment I can recall having this like outer body experience. Like I think there was like this big jumbo size like peanut M&Ms in the pantry. There were like cookies and like I just remember like I never experienced anything like it again, but like it was I don't wish it on anybody. Like it was a scary experience because you go to bed and you just feel so flat out miserable. And like I remember waking up the next morning and I was just a water balloon. And like it took a good 4 or 5 days for me to actually feel normal again. And honestly, truth be told, ever since that instance, that scared me so much that I was just so scared from it that like it's never happened again. And I know that's not the case for everybody, but
Was
I've been
that associated in any way with bodybuilding? Was that just prior
no,
to that, or
that was totally unrelated to bodybuilding.
were
This was
you
before
being, so I'm just trying to like understand like what was the trigger? Like, were you being
that.
completely clean eating? Were you kind of orthorexic at that time? Were you like
Yes.
only ate super clean and then
Yeah, I think that was like so right when I remember my later years of high school, that's kind of when I started to like dabble a little bit like with getting into bodybuilding and or like weight training. And I remember I did have this like tendency like to eat like super strict and super clean throughout the day. And then that would kind of lead to these like binges at night, right? So
Yeah.
it definitely did stem from that. So yeah, that's what I remember too, which is weird because like it happened on Thanksgiving, this binge I'm talking about. And Thanksgiving is obviously associated with a lot of like overeating at the meal. But I remember at the Thanksgiving meal, like I mean, I ate, but I didn't eat a ton. And I went home and, I was still kind of hungry. And that's when the floodgate opened and, I was
Yeah.
alone. So, but that event within its own scared me so much that I just remember like promising myself in the moment, I will never do this again because this is a feeling like I don't wish on anybody.
Yeah.
Great.
I haven't I haven't ever binged in a prep, and I don't know if I would ever say I've like truly binged. Uh, but I've definitely overate, like for sure, right? And there's been times in prep to where I have not been like I should. They're rare and they're few and far between, but has it happened? Yeah, I'd be lying if I said it didn't happen. And most of the times it happens is when I push myself too hard for too long. And again, like most people, I want that just to feel full for once, right? Now, the issue with that is the fact that you're not going to feel full, which that leads to a lot of the binging and the overeating and things like that, as you're constantly trying to fill. Imagine like it's a bucket with a bunch of holes that you're just dumping water in. That's pretty much what it's like. Now,
Yeah,
post show,
there's a weird place where your hunger hormones
yeah,
do not improve despite eating, and it can actually make it worse.
yes. And I think it was my third or fourth show ever. And I remember I got done with the show and I got some donuts and I ate the donuts and I ate so many donuts and ice cream that I was keeled over in pain, like in bed in the fetal position. I remember going to the bathroom, feeling like I was going to throw up, couldn't throw up, went back, laid on the floor, grabbed a box of donuts, pulled it on the ground, and ate more donuts while I was laying on the floor in a fetal position.
Definition of a binge um, is, I mean, you're eating despite physical discomfort almost.
Yeah. It's like that outer body experience. It's like, 'cause, like I just think back and it's crazy because the binge I just talked about, like even though it was so long ago, I still remember it and it's weird. It's just like in the moment you shouldn't be doing what you're doing, but it's like you almost feel like somebody else is like coming into your body and like overtaking you in the moment. Yeah, it's wild. It really is. And like I'm thankful.
So I made the biggest mistake, and this is something I tell clients now, and you guys, we talk about this quite a bit, is so I did a show in 2012, and then I think, obviously the show was like a Saturday. On like Monday, I flew to Australia and went to like a really fancy hotel in Melbourne called the Crown, which is like a Vegas hotel. And my buddy in Australia, Brett, was like, "Hey, for your birthday, I got you like this super, it's like a super fancy all you can eat breakfast buffet with like four chefs, and they had dessert stations and steak and all this stuff, right?" And so that is the wrong place to be. I felt like, hey, it's my birthday. I just traveled halfway around the world. I just competed. And I had another show. So I was like, yeah, I'll just eat and enjoy. And I'll never forget, I was still eating after 2 hours. And my friend was like, dude, like we have to go. Like this isn't good. You're like you can't get full. Like this is crazy. And I was literally like getting a plate of food, eating it, getting a plate of food, eating it. Yeah, and I just remember, and that's not what I consider the bad part. The bad part was a few hours later, I felt like I had to sneak down to the casino, like where all the food court was, and get more food. That should have been enough food for me for 2, 3 days. But yeah, that was nutty.
I think binge and the shame part of it, I think is in the hiding part is I think they very much go hand in hand. At least in my experience with people I know that struggle with that.
Oh, they absolutely do. Yeah. When I was in the midst of my ordeal in high school, like it always happened when no one was around, or like in my room, I'd bring in food like when no one was around. Like I don't know anybody
Yeah.
that struggles with binging and who does it in front of people. Cause like I said, that's kind of like moving into a dorm room and living in a room where there were two other girls with me
Mhm.
all the time. Like that's what kind of forced me to just like stop doing it. And then I remember I had stopped binging and I like was like, wow, okay, this feels so good. I feel so much better. And that's just what happened from there. So
It's
Well,
funny you bring that up, Lexi, because I've not, like I said, I've never really cheated on preps, but when I used to travel a ton for work and was on prep, and that's when I was living with my fiance at the time, and I can tell you this, I had thoughts of overeating while I was traveling in the room by myself, way more than I was at home. Those thoughts never even crossed my mind when I was at home.
yeah. I mean, that's actually the fact that you bring that up. Like sometimes I will tell clients that do struggle a little bit with this like their control around food. I will tell them like, be around people, like don't seclude yourself, try not to be alone all the time, because I think that can really help. Because you're generally not going to overeat to a crazy capacity if you're around people and they're watching you.
Yeah.
Because honestly, it's like kind of having a coach, they hold you accountable
Yeah.
too with that. And you're less likely to do that. So is that the best place to be mentally? Should we all be strong enough to not do that? In a perfect world, yes. Right? In a perfect world, yes. But we all have our certain struggles with things.
Right. Right.
And food can be I mean, we all know the feeling of like being super depleted and eating something that you haven't had in a while. And it absolutely is overwhelming, the desire to eat more of it. Like,
Oh
Mhm.
my gosh, yes.
I tell people, I tell every one of my clients about this that struggles with overeating. It's about things that you know and triggers that you have. And I equate a
yeah,
lot of things to like alcohol, right? Like, so if you're like an alcoholic, you don't want to keep alcohol in the house. I'm like a sugarholic and like sour candy. If I have that stuff in the house, it's all gone. So
or
I cannot
donuts.
keep it in the house. And I'm aware of that. And if I go get it and I get a family size bag, I know it's gone that night. I just don't keep it there. That's
Yeah.
how I deal with it.
You know, me and Lexi in Dallas last year just kept looking at each other because we're all just sitting around, and you
It
like
wasn't that many
subconsciously were
cookies.
just like one more, and I would look at Lexi and I'd be like, he got another one. He got
It
another
was
one.
like quarter size pieces, though. It wasn't full cookies at the time.
Yeah, Lexi broke it up so that you had less guilt.
Yeah, the crumble cookies. Yep. I
Yeah.
actually think that I have a
Oh, it was
vlog.
crumble. Okay.
I
Yeah.
think I have a vlog from that weekend and I did get some clips of the crumble cookies and Evan. But yeah, I mean honestly, like what we were just talking about the essence of being alone being a big trigger for a lot of people to overeat. Like something that I could tell, like if you are a competitor and you are worried specifically, let's say post show, about controlling yourself around food, a great idea and a great little quote unquote hack is make sure when you go home from that show or you go back to that hotel room or you go back to wherever you're going to go, like be with family, be with friends. Like don't go back to a hotel room like where or your house alone, because I feel like that could be a really big trigger. Like I can't really think of a time where after a show I've gone home immediately and just been alone, and I feel like if I would have that, that would be harder. But it's like when you can kind of surround yourself with people post show, I think it
Well,
lessens.
let's talk about some strategies at the end for how to make the process better. So, like we
Yeah.
started by defining like food issues. I might have a problem. I have a furniture delivery and I hear a truck outside. So the next thing that we want to talk about is what leads to these issues. Like, you know, what puts you in a position where you're more likely, because I think there are styles of prep, approaches to prep, aggressiveness in prep, that even cardio, the style of cardio you can do. Something I learned after switching up my cardio through different preps was like, I could not believe the change in my hunger signals just through the change in approach. Almost shocking.
Yeah.
So if I have to get up for a second, I'm going to mute you guys, but you guys just keep chatting. So
Yeah.
let's talk about, because I think in my mind, there's two clear things: meal plans and like macros.
Yeah. Yep. That's, I feel like, I mean, it is important to talk about absolutely the style or the approach that you take in prep. I mean, it can facilitate some of these tendencies to want to cheat or to want to binge or whatever you want to call it. And I think that's why, like, all of us coaches on Pro Physique and us three in particular, like I think we've all talked about, we're not anti meal plans completely. Like we're not 100% anti against them. However, I know like my first resort is not giving a client a cookie cutter cut and dry meal plan. I like to give them macros because I think that there is a lot to be said for psychologically when a client knows they can choose what they eat. Like I find that lessens the urge to want to eat what they can't eat, right? Because if you give a client like a meal plan and you tell them everything that they can eat and everything that they can't eat, it's almost like when you're told you can't eat something or it's not on the quote unquote meal plan, you want it more, right? You think about it more. So that's, I think, a big thing to kind of touch on first is the meal plan versus the macros.
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, this is like the answer for everything, right? Is this person dependent and is personality dependent on there?
Yep.
Some clients I have, and me in particular with it, I would rather have less food options for myself
Mm-hmm.
to take the worry and the thought out of it. And mainly because I know my own triggers. And if I have things that are sweet, like I know Steven has like a couple pieces of chocolate on prep. I could not do that. I know myself and I couldn't do it. That little bit would not be enough to satisfy me. So I'd rather not have it. Right.
Right.
And so I think some people kind of fall in that route. And I think earlier competitors, though, that know they're kind of that way, they know sweets trigger them, yet they say, oh, it's okay. I can only have a couple of these every day. Well, if you know that's a trigger and you have a little bit of a trigger every day, what happens when you're tired, you're depleted, and that all that drive goes out the window at night when you're tired? You're not going to have those two pieces of candy. You're going to have 10, 12 pieces of candy, or maybe more than that, right? So
Right.
um, I think, and I run into this with a lot of others too when it comes to macros. It's for some people, they can work in a lot of different things and be totally fine. For other people, it is a recipe for disaster. And I think it all goes down to trying to feel full and trying to feel satisfied, right?
Yeah.
And not that you shouldn't feel satisfied, but feeling full and satisfied may not be something that you're going to get a ton of times throughout your prep, especially towards the end.
Right, right. Yeah, I think, I mean, you bring up a great point. It's about knowing the type of person you are too. Cause like I have gotten to a point where, for example, peanut butter, and I know this is like a big trigger food for a
Oh,
lot
yeah.
of people, right? That for me, like going back to what you were talking about at the beginning, my binging days, that was a huge trigger food for me. Like I
Hmm.
would I would take like Ritz crackers to a peanut butter jar and like use it as a dip. Like it was bad. But now like I have it and I actually keep it in my freezer because I like to have like a serving or a half a serving like of it frozen because it kind of tastes like fudge. And honestly, just one serving of that or half a serving a day, I'm fine. Like it, I look forward to it. I enjoy it. But it hasn't always been that way. But I also
Yeah.
know like some people can have a little bit of something every day because for some people it's like that repeated exposure or that desensitization kind of almost makes them think a little bit less about the food, right? But
Hmm.
again, it just comes down to knowing what type of person you are, right? Like for some people, if they have that repeated exposure every day, it's going to make them crave that said food even more, or it's going to make them think about that food even more. But
Yep.
like I also know on the opposite end, there are competitors where, hey, if you tell them the whole prep, they have to take out everything they know and they love, they're going to crave it more. And then what are they going to do after prep? Well, because they didn't have that said food or food group for 5 months, the floodgates are open and they're going to go
Yeah.
crazy, right? So I think it's it depends what type of person you are. I do think that repeated exposure, that desensitization can be a good tool. I know I had a friend who, she wasn't my client, but she was coached by one of my good friends, and she, a couple, like this was like a year ago, she told me that every day she had like a piece of chocolate in prep, but it kept her sane, right? So it's just kind of knowing, I think, what type of person you are, and if you can just have a bite of something or a serving of something and leave it at that.
Yeah, like what I recommend doing again, the difference between macros and meal plan is we give you macros and you create your own meal plan, right?
Right.
And what I suggest for people is, hey, if you feel like that's going to help, go ahead and add it, right? If you have questions, like I'll be happy to review it for you. I'll tell you what I think is going to digest well, not digest well. We can kind of work based off that, but go ahead and try it. But when you make that meal plan and you set your meal timings, just stick to it. Like don't go off of it. That's when problems happen. And then if you realize you find yourself craving more of something and wanting to fall off of it, then maybe we should think about removing that trigger part of it. That's typically the way I like to go about it. But it's my clients get a lot of freedom until we stop making progress. We stop making progress,
Yeah.
and that's when I look at things. And I can tell you the culprit of the past month has been cauliflower rice. That has been the
Oh
culprit that has popped up in
gosh.
more of my check-ins than anything. And they
Just from a
swear it
bloating
helps us do.
perspective or an accuracy perspective? Because I mean, even if you overeat cauliflower rice, unless you're putting it in oil or something, it wouldn't be.
The volume of that you get for the carb is extraordinarily high. And I found, and they swear it helps with their digestion. I'm like, we'll see about a week how that goes. And it
Okay.
never, ever, ever does. No weight stalls.
No.
It doesn't move.
Well, I had a
And
problem for a while with LMNT packets. A lot of people were, like taking in
really,
two a day,
oh, that's a
and
lot. Yeah.
Oh,
it
yeah.
like what I typically notice with higher sodium foods is like for a day or two you'll be, you know, holding a little water, but even if you keep it, you'll come back down. But with something about those LMNT packets, it just the water does not come off, and I think it's because it's not just sodium; it's sodium, magnesium,
Potassium,
potassium.
magnesium.
It's
Yeah.
so
2 a day is
like
a lot for
2 days.
that.
I've literally had
Yeah.
girls pull out their LMNT packets for a couple days and their weight dropped 3 pounds and stayed down. And I'm like, wow, those things are powerful. So
I mean, I think they're really beneficial pre-workout,
yeah.
especially when you're going to sweat a lot, but it's a tool to use for that than just seltzer
Oh,
foods normally.
speaking
It's a
of, I know
thousand
Connor,
milligrams of sodium.
you just triggered something for me. Core Nutritionals just came out with a product called Pickle Pump. It's
What?
like a pre-workout sodium, pickle flavored additive. So
That's
Nice.
shout out to Core Nutritionals. But
hilarious.
yeah, like obviously sodium and those kind of things are great for training. And so that's, I mean, so here's another problem with meal plans, right? So I think sometimes people get grouped into two groups. You either are pro meal plan or pro macros, and there is no overlap. The problem with that thinking is like you should have a meal plan with your macros. The problem I have with meal plans is like I've seen some from these coaches and teams that literally say things like limit sodium, like avoid sodium, avoid condiments,
No fruit.
um,
I've seen that one before.
avoid fruit. And it's basically like 7 spares of asparagus and boiled chicken, and then cod and asparagus, and then, a quarter cup of rice at the end of the day. That's your treat. And then 4 ounces of chicken and these kind of meals. And I think this is a plan that for most people is going to be problematic because
Yes.
it's going to create that 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 binary thinking of like this is the plan, and if I go off the plan. And that's when I first started having people that were telling me they were binge eating, and I was like, well, explain it to me. Because in my mind, like let's say tonight I'm hungry for some ice cream and I eat some ice cream, and if it's off my plan, the next day I just go, okay, I'll just pull out some fats and carbs, and it might even be 2 days worth I have to pull out, and I'll just balance it out. So I would say, what's your thinking? Why are you going, okay, I went off my plan on Thursday, I'll just get back it on Monday, and they're just off to the races. And they said it's because they know when they go back to the plan that it's that restrictive. So they're just trying to get stuff in while they feel like they can.
I think the mental stress on that is really tough on people that are uninformed. And a lot of the athletes, they hire a coach because they want to trust their coach, right? And the knowledge behind it. And if you think the only way you're going to progress is no sodium, no condiments, boiled everything, asparagus, and a quarter cup of rice, and you think that's what it takes to go there, then anything off of that is going to stress you to no end. That's why I'm a big proponent of let's concentrate on the things that actually matter and not the things that don't. And if you hire a coach that thinks you have to be perfect, like to this level and this degree and this extreme to get results on things, the mental torture that plays on you it's just just as extreme as those plans are. And they're out there.
I,
And
I mean, I've talked to athletes that gained 30, 40 pounds after their show because they couldn't
Yeah.
stop binge eating. And then their solution was to hire that coach again.
And go back again. Yep.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I notice a big, I don't know the exact numbers, but I notice a big, like, a significant difference between those who are given macros versus a restrictive meal plan in prep. Like I notice a big difference between how they treat the post show, right? Because I think we can all agree that a lot of our athletes, not to say, none of them struggle. Like, of course, we all have athletes that struggle, but I think a lot of times clients that are given macros and just at least given the option to choose what they're eating, even if it is still all whole foods, but just because they're given the option of what they can eat throughout prep, generally they don't have those like vigorous or as intense cravings post show to go off and binge, right? So I noticed there being a pretty big difference between those who have a meal plan versus a macros and just their approach post show and their ability to stay adherent
Yeah.
post show.
And I think that's what we do good as coaches. I know all three of us do is we get to where we really understand our clients. And I think we can all tell which ones are going to struggle post show before the show even starts. And I know I've talked about this before, but I try to precondition them, right? Kind of, hey, this is the way it's going to be post show here. This is my worry. These are my concerns going into the show, right? Um, Personality, I think, dictates so much of this. And I think that's what makes a good coach is being able to read their personality and know the way to guide them. Now, I'll tell you this, when I know it's going to be a struggle, I can try to prepare those people the best I can. And I would say it might work 50% of the time. The other 50% of the time, what by fears happens kind of happens. Is that your experience, Lexi, or a little bit different?
Yeah, I would totally agree with you. You can generally, as a coach, like I hate to say this, you get a feel for,
Yeah.
psychology plays a huge role here. And this is where like our job it's hard, but it's fun because everybody's a little bit different, right? But I generally, yes, I do know the clients that are going to generally do very well post show and the ones that maybe will struggle a little bit more. And as a coach, I try my best to, like you said, prepare clients the best as possible. And I do try to really not, I don't want to say, I don't want to be a helicopter coach post show either, meaning like I don't
Yeah.
want to, micromanage them and check up on them like every day. But if I am worried about a client and their general adherence post show, I do try to check up on them a little bit more
Mhm.
frequently. And, rather than just jumping back to weekly check-ins, we'll check in, every couple days for the first couple
Yeah.
weeks until we build that momentum. Because I'm really big on, I tell all my girls, you have to kind of almost condition your brain to think of the first like 4 to 5 weeks post show as being prep. Because if you can honestly make it through the first 4 to 5 weeks post show, I don't know about you, Evan, but I find that that tends to be the sweet spot where a lot of things kind of get easier. Adherence
Mhm.
is easier. The food noise isn't as is vigorous. The want to go off the plan isn't as vigorous. So I feel like you have to kind of just look at those first 4 to 5 weeks post show as still being prep. And then I generally find if clients can make it past that point, things kind of start to level out. Their hormones are a little bit, more level. They're acting more with the logic and not the emotion all the time. And things, get a little bit easier from that standpoint.
No, absolutely. 100% agree with that. It's if you can, and I think another big part of this is especially with those clients that we know struggle. And typically, if I have a client that falls off plan, let's say we're like 9 weeks out and they fall off plan for a day or so and you get back on, I know the likelihood of that happening again is probably there. So we start to discuss why did this happen, right? And a lot of times it's just poor planning. It's for poor
Right,
planning. Or
right,
they eat when they're hungry, not when they're supposed to eat. And that's why
right.
a big part is, hey, like we are telling our body and our mind what to do here. We are not letting our mind dictate this stuff. We need to come up with a plan and stick to the plan because if you decide, hey, I'm hungry, I'm going to go ahead and eat now. I'm going to eat, I have these macros, I'm going to eat these meals now. You're going to be out of food by noon.
Right. Well, and I think that kind of can bring us into something we can discuss about, okay, well, what to do if you are a client and let's say, we've talked a lot about post show, but let's talk about what happens if you are in prep and hey, you have an overeating episode, or maybe you classify it as a binge, or you fall off plan, you give into the peanut butter jar at night. Like, let's talk about what you should do as an athlete if that happens. Cause let's be honest, you know what, we're all human. It happens from time to time with athletes. It doesn't make you any worse of an athlete, if it happens. But I think the biggest key is honesty with your coach, which I know is not easy. I know a lot of people don't want to tell their coach when they mess up like that. But like I can say as a coach, I would much rather a client be honest with me about that than for me to wonder, oh my God, why is their body responding the way it's responding, thinking that they're following the plan, right? And like to your point, Evan, if something, let's just say a client does have a binge in the middle of prep, let's say we're 8 weeks out. That's still enough time for us to, to kind of clean things up. But furthermore, we're going to talk about why it happened, right? What was the trigger? Was it poor planning? Was it, oh my gosh, I'm super stressed from work and I just took it out on the food? Like, let's talk about why it happened. What can we learn from it to prevent it from happening in the future?
I'm going to speak for myself here, but I'm assuming y'all two are going to have the exact same answer. I have never been mad at a client that came to me and told me they fell off plan.
Nope.
Never been mad about that. I'm upset if they didn't tell me or if they let it go for 2 to 3 days. And I don't at the first time I don't get upset, but I tell them, "Hey, if this happens again, don't be afraid. Reach out to me. Let's get to the bottom of this. Let's not let it spiral. Not because of stage. The stage is always going to be there. We can always pick a different show. But I'm more worried about your mental state after that because no one feels good about themselves after it. No one does. So let's
Right.
protect that and let's get that in a
Well,
good place.
the other thing is like we tend to look at like the human body and in prep as like, okay, this is the plan. And if we don't follow the plan, it's bad. I've multiple times seen situations where somebody went off their plan and it benefited them. Meaning, coach, I ended up having last night 2 pieces of pizza and a half a pint of ice cream because I just, my husband was eating, I just couldn't take it. But I woke up down 2 pounds today. And I'll
Then your
literally
body
go,
needed it.
I go, okay, well, let's look at that. What else happened? Oh, well, I slept 9 hours. Okay. What else happened? Well, I took a big poop. My digestive system was backed up. Okay. So it's not as if there is this formula to prep that is perfect for every single person. And in fact, refeeds are a strategy that we employ. Diet breaks are a strategy we employ. But something that bodybuilders often struggle with is eating something that's not prep friendly because they feel like they're, you know, morally doing something wrong. My last 2 preps ago, I made the commitment. This is going to sound crazy. I went to Five Guys every week on Friday and then trained legs after. I would always hit new lows over the weekend, right? It just kept my digestive system going. I looked forward to it all week. I planned it out with my calories and macros, but it was just something that I included. My last prep, I did not do that. I just didn't feel like I needed it. But there's not like this moral high ground for getting body fat off. You've got to find methods that work for you.
Absolutely. And like you said, Paul, sometimes good things can come from unfortunate circumstances, right? I've had people that said, well, I just felt good this week, so I did like double the cardio. Sorry, I know you told me I shouldn't do the cardio here. And I look at them like, well, shit, the weight moved down 3 pounds here. How's your energy? Well, it's really good still. Okay. Your hunger? How's your hunger? It's
Yeah.
actually really good. Okay. All right then. You feel okay to do that again next week? Yeah. Let's go. Right? It can go both directions on that
Well,
type
let's
of
talk a
thing.
little bit about styles of cardio and its impact on hunger.
Yes, because that is a big, big thing. I've run into that a few times recently. Yeah,
Yeah, I know.
Have either of you done a lot of interval cardio in your preps?
I used to. Yeah.
Not in prep. I mean, I remember I did a lot of HIIT style training like before I kind of got into bodybuilding, like boot camp style classes. Um, and what's interesting is maybe I've just never paid attention to it, but I've never really noticed a big difference in like my hunger levels. Now, I personally have always noticed a big difference in my hunger levels though, if I train in the morning versus if I don't. So like if I train early in the morning, I always notice I'm hungrier throughout the day. Whereas if I train later in the day, I find my hunger is a lot more manageable. So that's something I've noticed personally about me. But no, I've never done HIIT cardio like in prep.
I used to when I was with Aaron, we would do wind gates for hit cardio, wind gate sprints, which are, if anyone knows what those are like all out sprints as hard as you can on a bike, like to the point of
Wind gates
murdering
are
yourself.
the most brutal form of high intensity cardio you can do.
Yeah.
So I'll paint the picture. You're on a spin bike, usually in a lab. They don't usually have these in a gym, but you're on a spin bike with some resistance. They get you spinning to maximum speed, so you're pumping as hard as you can. Then they drop a stack of weights on the resistance. So put it this way, you couldn't even get the bike moving if the weights were on there. So
Yeah.
now you're going full speed and it's like you're all of a sudden going through sludge and they just say go to failure and they're usually in there like egging you on and you can maybe last 10 seconds like with
Yeah.
those weights on there. And the first time I did it, I vomited.
Yeah, we did the Wingate sprints a few times like that. The other ones we just did at a powerhouse with a resistance knob and kind of
Yeah.
like rigged it ourselves with it. And you go as hard as you can. Like we went for a time of like 20 seconds, and it was wait until you get your heart rate gets all the way back down the baseline. As soon as
Yeah.
it is, you go again.
Like 2,
And
3, 4 minutes sometimes, right? Like
yeah,
it's
it can
crazy.
take a long time. In true hit cardio, your heart rate has to get back down to your baseline before you go again.
And that's
And
what I think people misunderstand. We're like, Coach, can I do hit? And I'm like, well, describe it for me.
they're talking about
1
interval
minute
training.
fast, 1 minute regular. I'm like, that's not hit. But
That's
yes,
Not
you're right.
it.
not hit. If you can
That's
do it
just intervals.
for a minute, you're
That's
not
interval training.
yeah.
I
Now,
describe it as sprint to failure. That's hit.
yes. And I can tell you my hunger was through the roof and my recovery was not good. Um, it
I
wasn't.
was also like Evan, when I look back at those preps, hunger was through the roof and mood was like an up and
Horrible.
down, like a roller coaster.
Horrible. Yep. Yep.
And I
Yeah.
think there is a strong correlation with like your mood and your blood sugar. Your blood sugar is dropping, your
Mhm.
mood is dropping. You're frustrated, you're angry, you're quick to
Yeah.
react.
And to piggyback off that, so I had a client that overate a little bit, and not necessarily the overeating part of it, but it was more she was completely like to the point where she couldn't go to the gym. She was taking naps all day, and I start looking at her data, and I'm saying, "Hey, girl, for your cardio here, you are going way too hard, way too hard." Her heart rate was like in the 150s for 50 straight minutes. Like you and this is after with her food being low, after training hard, and it was days and days and days in a row. It's like you got to back down on this. You are doing too much. And the moment she backed down on that, she felt better, her mood was better, appetite was better, and her weight dropped a lot. And again, if we didn't catch it at that point, like if I didn't pay attention, I guarantee you she would have fell off the rails and ate. Guarantee it. Guarantee it. Because it's really, really tough when you are that worn down. So the type of cardio that you implement, I think does impact you psychologically and impacts your recovery. And I talk about that a lot. Like, is the juice like worth the squeeze, right? What is systemically fatiguing and what is not? And trying to find that balance in when you need to push can be difficult, right? But that's why you have a coach that should pay attention to those types of things and take into account your biofeedback, like your hunger, your stress, your digestion, your sleep. They all play roles.
If we're looking at strategies around how to improve hunger and prep, like that's specifically like the focus right now,
Mm-hmm.
low intensity steady state cardio not only doesn't make me hungrier, in some instances, it removes my appetite.
Yeah.
I've literally been hungry and been like, let me just go for a walk and let me just like in an odd way, a diet soda and a walk, and I can go another couple hours. And that's another thing we can talk about, diet sodas, things like that. But the specifically the walking low intensity steady state is a fat burning activity, primarily uses adipose tissue. And I don't want you guys to get all excited and be like, oh, it's fat burning, we're trying to burn fat. It's very low calorie burning compared to hit cardio, that was the argument, right? Like you burn the same amount of calories in a 30-minute hit session that you would in say like an hour or 90-minute low intensity session. So that was the argument. But what people didn't account for was that 30-minute hit session wrecked you. So you just laid around all day. Whereas if you go for a 90-minute walk, no one's wrecked from that. I mean,
Right.
within reason.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and something else too that we don't have to talk about this yet if we don't want to, but I just thought of this and I don't want to forget to talk about it is strategies for lessening like the urge to binge or to fall off plan would be, I don't know how you guys feel about this, but I see a lot of competitors posting about like all this food porn all the time on their Instagram or their social media. And I know we've all been guilty of like scrolling and looking at all this like amazing food and prep, but like I don't know. I feel like that can be such a slippery slope because that just feeds into that like food focused nature, right? And like you're just so fixated on what you can't have and it's in the forefront of your mind all the time. And I think that can be a slippery slope too. Like, as much as I hate to say it, like don't be scrolling TikTok or Instagram every night looking at all this crazy food.
So Lexi, it's interesting you brought up that because a conversation I had recently was I feel like there are certain groups of people that every time I get together with them, the goal is cookies, donuts, treats. And that's not generally what I would do on a given day or and then I'm
No.
like, why are we doing this to ourselves? Like, listen, I'm going to have a cinnamon roll when I want one, but I don't want the association of like, you know, because we get together. I've always said this, fitness events are like excuses for us to like not act like we're at fitness, you know, drink alcohol, eat donuts, and then we go back home and we go back into our little, you know, routines. So I've tried to keep my routine more normal, even around that type of stuff. And what's funny is I've even noticed people be like, why aren't you eating the donuts, or why aren't you eating the cake or this and that? And I just like, I'm good. So even with people in our sphere, there can be like group eating associations. Like, this is what we do.
Yeah. And I feel like there's just, I mean, there's a rise, and not to knock these companies by any means, because they're cool, but like there's been a rise of a lot. Like I have seen like bodybuilders in particular, like starting companies like cookie companies or dessert companies. So I feel like there's been a rise of that in the industry. And I think that is why, you know, we are seeing it posted about a lot more, just talked about a lot more. But I definitely think that just, I mean, because I could say like if I sit and then let's say I'm scrolling TikTok or Instagram and looking at food porn all the time, like my brain is just going to think about that food more and more, right? And I'm going to crave it more and more, most likely. And I think that's the case for a lot of people. So, you know, that don't, if you're worried about binging or falling off plan or even the post show, like try to limit how much you're doing that, because
I just, in my opinion, you can't put that food on a pedestal.
no.
You can't be like, when prep is over, I get to have this great brownie or this. I would rather just have a bite of that brownie during prep than wait and put it on this pedestal where I need to do this.
Absolutely. Well, and theoretically too, I can't tell you how many times I've had people tell me, oh yeah, you know, I got these cookies post show and I had them and they were not as good as I thought they were going to be. Like theoretically,
Right.
I think we put them on a pedestal. We think they're going to be like God. And then you eat it and you're like, okay, it's decent. Or you realize, okay, it tastes good for a minute. And then now what after that? Like it's this minute of gratification and then it's gone. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
yeah, I think I agree with can't put those foods on a pedestal by any means.
Yeah. It's,
No,
but listen,
that's-
and I'm not to demonize it. I think there is the place, and I think there's probably a learning curve. Like, if you can make it through an entire prep and your goal is like, you know what, I just want a couple Krispy Kremes, or I just want this, you know, cookie brownie thing that I've been looking at. We're not saying don't do that, but we're saying don't create it where like that's the thing that's gonna make you happy. Just look forward to it and then move on, because it's a slippery slope. It's very easy to have some stuff for a couple days and then, you know, be up 7-8 pounds by Monday after the show, and then be like, oh no, what do I do? Right. And feel helpless.
Right, right. And plus too, if you're talking about all those foods all the time throughout prep and like counting down the days until I can have XYZ, and like your family, your friends, they're going to hear you talk about that, and like they're going to want to celebrate with you post show with that stuff. So that's not going to make it any easier either. So yeah, I think I'm all for having like a couple treats post show, but it can be a slippery.
I got a question. Comment below if you're listening to this podcast and you have a group of friends and you keep a list of restaurants that you want to visit when you go to certain cities. Don't we all do that?
Yeah, it
I
is.
definitely have like friends that are like, hey, when we go here, this I want to check this place.
Oh, I have friends that do that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't do that,
No,
but
I
I have
don't do
friends
that.
that do that.
No.
Yeah.
I'm the most boring, basic eater. Like, you could give me like, my new addiction is Fresh Kitchen, but Chipotle, Fresh Kitchen.
I was gonna
Fresh
say
Kitchen's solid, man.
Chipotle is your jam. And I saw you post about
Oh,
Fresh Kitchen yesterday, and I was like, wait, you just discovered Fresh Kitchen?
Well,
no,
they
we
just
me,
put one
me
in
and
my
Paul been
house.
there.
There's one at the end of my street. It's closer than McDonald's. Like, I have to pass it to go to McDonald's.
Yeah, me and Paul been to Fresh Kitchen.
Yeah,
Oh,
I've been to it, but
shout
it
out
was
to
more like a
Chipotle.
treat, not like, you know, yeah. I
Yeah.
think they're gonna blow up now. I just like, when I go up there, it's packed. Like, and it
Mm,
moves like Chipotle. There could be a line out the
yes.
door and you're through in 5 minutes.
Fun
Shout
fact.
out Chipotle too, though. That new honey chicken they got there, fire,
Well, actually,
fire.
fun fact, not that it's a fun fact, but like just a fact, I think the Fresh Kitchen that is near me in South Tampa, I want to say this happened like a year ago, maybe a little bit less than a year ago. There was a fire and it like burned down. Or I don't know if it burned down completely, but I remember hearing about it because I know exactly where it's at. And they had like a fire and had to like, yeah, it was bad.
The one in South Tampa,
Yeah.
not the Kennedy one.
No, the one
Okay,
that's like near the one in Soho.
yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you guys aren't familiar with Fresh Kitchen, I looked it up. There's only 9 locations currently, but it's basically maybe there's like 8 different carb sources to include like a kale salad, a cauliflower mash that's vegan, coconut rice that's vegan, a lot of vegan and vegetarian options. And then you pick a couple bases, you pick a couple veggies, which are like the sweet potatoes, the green
Mushrooms.
beans, broccoli, mushrooms are my favorite.
Yep.
And then
Mushrooms.
you've got your protein sources, which they have like citrus chicken, barbecue chicken, they have like steak,
Salmon.
salmon. Yeah. So even like they have like an almond crusted chicken,
Mm.
like, and I don't listen, I get the biggest bowl and it's $13. And I'm like, this, I've actually wanted to put this on YouTube for a minute now. It's that bowl is cheaper than if I go get a value meal at McDonald's.
It is.
Like a number 2, it's the same price. Now, granted, I don't get the drink and a side of fries, but like this bowl of food for $13 feels like a steal with the cost of food right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, if anyone has a Fresh Kitchen around them, there's an Uber Eats hack that you can do on that to where you get the smaller bowl and then you just add the more expensive meats because they don't change the price of the meats for additional meats. So you can get like double the meats for about half the price. Thank you later.
Mm. Very
Well, you just, someone from Fresh Kitchen is listening to this and you just blew it. Shout out to Fresh Kitchen. If you guys are looking for athletes to sponsor,
Yes,
ready to serve.
we're here. Whatever
My
you need.
favorite is the Whole Foods salad bar, but that is so it adds up.
That can get
so
expensive because
That's
it's by
like
weight.
$30 for.
Oh my gosh. I remember the last time I got it, it was coming home from like I think a show in Orlando, and I grabbed it before getting on the highway and I didn't even put that much in it. And I go to ring it up and I was like, oh my God. And I was like, is it socially acceptable to go back and like put stuff back? 'Cause it was so expensive. I didn't do that, don't worry. But I was like, ooh, it was expensive.
Oh no, I was with Ryan Conley. I don't know if you guys know
Yeah.
who that is.
Yeah.
Good friend of mine, firefighter. And so we were at Whole Foods and he like, he's a big boy. He's over
Yeah.
250 pounds and he filled his up. So we're at the checkout line. It rings up and it's like $30. He's like, what? And he just left. Didn't pay for it, didn't take it back, just walked out the door. Like, you're out of your mind, and just left. And I was like,
Oh my gosh.
well, I'm not paying for his, but I'll pay for mine.
That's so funny.
This is my complete thought anytime I go to the Whole Foods bar. I don't get anything that's dense in weight.
No.
Like I will
Or
never
has
get the
liquid.
rice there.
Nothing with liquid. Yeah.
Yeah, nothing nothing the liquid there. I will get something that is packed with protein that's as light as humanly possible. I'll get as much of that as I can.
Yeah.
Yep, that's the
If you
hack.
get some rice on that, it's going to cost you $10 because the rice weighs so much.
Or the hard-boiled eggs. Those they have those add a lot of weight. So yeah, but okay, well, going back
Let's
to
talk about a few of the strategies that, like, obviously we've been coaching me for the longest, but you guys have been at this for a while now. And, something that specifically I do as I coach you, Lexi, in prep is we take a diet break. And this to me has been the single greatest tool for positive association with post-show mental health, body composition, just energy levels. And the reason I think it's so successful, and so let's define a diet break. You're in prep, you're in a deficit. Let's say you're doing 70 minutes of cardio 5 days a week and you're on 110 carbs and 40 fat. A diet break would be like 150 or 60 carbs, 50 fat, and your cardio comes down to like 35 minutes a day, right? It's not a complete departure. It's not a break from prep or a break from dieting, but just these small toggle switches, and body composition improves, digestion improves, sleep improves. And the thing that I never really correlated with before was the idea that food can go up and cardio can come down, and it's going to be a positive outcome, because I think most people think when the show is over, it's all negative outcomes. And so they see, oh, wow, if I control this, I might even feel better, look better, and maintain or lose weight. And then when the show is over, if we've done a diet break or maybe multiple diet breaks, and we can even talk about peaking protocols that help with post-show eating, there's this method in their head where they go, okay, cool, I know what to do. I know I can bring food up to the point now where on my peak week plans, I include their macros for the following week. I'm not waiting to give them a reverse diet. I'm reversing them, and that's their new calories, depending on what's next. If there's another show, that's a different question, but so yeah.
Yeah, I think diet breaks help a ton. And I mean, I can think back. I remember the first refeed I ever took, like, and I think every athlete has this thought of like, you almost feel like you're cheating, right? But I feel like the refeeds always really helped me too in prep of just knowing, okay, I get, at one, as you get deeper into prep, generally with our approach, like clients are usually taking 1 or 2 a week. And I just remember that always helped me too. Cause like, okay, it gave me a little bit more buy-in to, okay, I can make it through these next 4 or 5 really low days, knowing I have, 1 to 2 refeeds after that. So I think that's always something that really helped me as an athlete. And then also like our peak week strategy and the linear loading that we do with most clients, that I think really helps too. Especially because ideally a client is getting a good amount of food the day before show day, specifically carbs and fat. And that kind of just, kind of takes away from like really feeling like you want to go crazy post show. Like I know for me, and I've heard other athletes say this too, like the biggest thing I crave after a show is like, as silly as it sounds, I want a big like salad or like a big poke bowl. Like I want vegetables because you don't have many of those, or if any, on show day or the day before. And like that's what I always crave post show.
I crave not being anal, not
Yeah.
tracking and weighing. Like I've literally gone out to eat post show and gotten like a quinoa bowl with chicken because I just didn't want to track anything, right? Like so like for me it's less about because we've talked about the prep funnel before. The prep funnel for me is like at the beginning of prep, I'm eating out a little bit, I'm plugging everything in my macros, and then we hit a sticking point and you go, okay, I got to stop eating out. And then you go, okay, now I got to stop adding this food. And by the end of prep, your choices are pretty narrow. Your timing of meals is super consistent. You become, I always call it a prep robot. You just, you've got your meals, you've got your foods prepped, you know what you're doing, you don't even think anymore. You just go through the motions. And then that to me is what I want to do post show, because I don't want to go through the motions. I want to look at a menu and go, that sounds delicious. I'm going to have that, not have that like preordained, this is my next meal. So it's
Yeah.
not so much about cutting loose or having like one of my favorite post show memories of all time. My client Ray Clark, we went out after his show, and he had like a pizza, and he's like, "Coach, can I get dessert?" I said, "Well, like, what are you thinking?" He goes, "Can I have another pizza?"
I
I was
love
like,
it.
"Ray, that's probably overdoing it, buddy. 2 pizzas, like that's."
Like 2 whole pizzas, not just
I mean,
slices.
Ray's
he's
a
a
big
big
man.
man. He's a
Ray's a big
man.
man.
He's like 230 pounds on stage, and he's a natural bodybuilder, like the big man. He probably should have played linebacker for the Ravens in the 90s. Um, but yeah, that I was like, no, 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 that's probably not, buddy. Like let's curtail that. But yeah.
One thing you brought up, Paul, I want to touch on here that I do think is important is when you brought up the diet break and you laid out a really good example of it. Like we're moving up from 110 carbs to maybe 150, maybe 160, reducing cardio in half, upping fats a little bit there. You understand these are micro adjustments that make a big difference. That's why we're big proponents of kind of laying out your plan and eating on your plan. Because if you're not, you're just trying to eyeball and throw some stuff here and there and taking extra bites and adding a little bit extra and not tracking it there, then these micro adjustments that we make later in prep aren't going to make as
Oh
big
no.
of a difference. They
I mean,
aren't
50 grams of carbs too at a competitor sounds like a ton. They'll be like, "Oh my, I get 50 carbs." It's 200 calories. You can burn 200 calories chewing a day, right? So
Mhm.
it's not like it's this, but it feels monumental. But if you're taking licks and nibbles, you can easily have 500 to 1,000 extra calories. Like,
Easily.
as a dad with kids that just they never finish. They're not like, oh, where's my next meal? They're not like, they're like they'll eat half a Pop Tart and leave it on the counter. What do you think I'm gonna do? If I'm not in prep, I'm eating that damn thing. But
Right.
and then you also forget about it later in the day when you're like
Mhm.
recounting, I only did 2,300 calories today. No, you forgot 700. You had 3,000 calories. So yeah.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah.
So one thing, if we're talking about like, I'm not like a big fan of hacks and things like that. Um, but I've mentioned this to a lot of people and they really find it helpful, is I'm a big fan of like LaCroix or Waterloos or any of the fizzy waters that you can get, the flavored waters. Now, They don't have a lot of flavoring in them. And everyone also knows I like my liquid stevia. I get the one with the little syringe in it, and I'll pull up like a quarter syringe of that, drop it in the carbonated water, shake it up, not shake it up because it'll carbonate, but mix it up a little bit. And it literally tastes like a calorie-free soft drink.
It is a
And
calorie-free soft drink. Just drink a damn Sprite, you muppet.
and I get up in the middle of the night. If I'm hungry, that's what I'll do. I'll take it. I will chug that down. I will burp like
Yeah.
the world's going to end, and I will lay back down and I will sleep like a baby.
Yeah. There is something magical about carbonated beverages and
It's
prep
huge.
for sweet tooth, for stuff like that.
And
Yeah.
they're so clean. It's just water and natural flavor, right? It's literally nothing in there. And then I just put a little stevia in it, digest great, never have an issue with it. That has helped a lot of people. A lot of people. If you
Yeah.
struggle with that, give it a try.
I
It's
find
way better than stacking your food full of cauliflower rice.
Oh God, yeah. I find that like decaf coffee always helps me too. Not black, but like I'll add like a little bit of almond milk, sometimes a little bit of protein powder, like not much, just to add some flavor and like sipping on something like that that's really hot. I don't know, that always helps me too.
Mhm.
So yeah. Is there anything else that we want to kind of touch on when it comes to this topic? I guess, well, one thing I will kind of come around circle and say too is I think we kind of alluded to this earlier, but honestly, if you're a competitor, you're in the midst of prep or even post show and you F up and you fall off the plan, you fall off the rails, like the worst thing you can do is hide that from your coach. Like we all agreed, like there has never been a time where we have punished, shamed, or made a client feel bad for coming to us and being open about something like that. In fact, I think as a coach, one of the most disappointing things is when you have clients that like you find out later on that they were hiding something from you like that. Or like honestly, one of the worst things is post show when a client falls off the rails and they're ashamed and they just ghost you. Like I think that's we can probably all agree that's one of the worst feelings as a coach. Like we want to help you, right? So honesty is the best policy. And I know it's not easy to tell your coach when these things happen, but like at the end of the day, this is our job. This is what we're here to help with. If you were perfect all the time, you probably wouldn't need us as much, right? So just a reminder as we kind of wrap up this episode.
Yes, huge with that, guys. And any clients that we have, give us the opportunity to, if you think well, not just us, but if you think your coach is going to react in a bad way, give them the opportunity to actually show you that. Be honest with them. Be honest with them and see how they react based off that. See how they react. It's also a good test for you, for your coach, right? When things don't go right, how are they going to react?
Yeah.
Really, the only people that I see that reply not favorably are the people that either they've never prepped themselves, so they don't understand the mindset of a competitor, um, or they take it as a personal insult, like you're lying to them, or you are somehow,
Yeah.
and that's a dangerous place to be because that's a coach that their ego is more important than your well-being. So just be careful of coaches that talk down to you, in general. Like,
Yes.
you know, it's very important as an athlete that you feel you can have your conversation with your coach, feel understood. And listen, there's times for tough conversations. And
Mhm.
I've told people, hey, if you can't have peanut butter or cashew butter or something like that in the house without it being under lock and key, either don't have it in the house or maybe we shouldn't be in prep. Like,
Mhm.
Right.
these are
No,
some hard truths.
and I think, to kind of wrap things up, I think something that I meant to say at the beginning is if you are somebody that you are considering starting a prep and you already struggle pretty severely with like could be closet eating, binging, just binging tendencies even, or just disordered thought patterns towards food, do yourself a favor and work on that first before putting yourself into a contest prep because there's very few instances where people that struggle with that can do a contest prep and like it improves. But a lot of times, if you're already struggling with that before starting prep is only going to probably make it worse. So do yourself a favor. And, we've got a great mindset coach on our team, Danica. I know there's other people out there that work specifically like with bodybuilders and their relationship with food. So like do yourself a favor and work on getting that to a good spot. Maybe it's not perfect, but at least improve it before starting prep because prep is only going to be a potential band-aid or just make things worse in the long term.
Yeah, it can. Also, I think that's really important to note. But I think it's also important to note that you don't have to be perfect with all of this stuff, you can still have your struggles, guys. Like
Yeah.
if you think you have to go in to be able to prep and you can't struggle with any of this stuff, that's not what Lex is saying. That's not what any of us are saying. We all have our struggles with things, but there's a difference between struggling and something that consumes a quarter of your thoughts every day. That's a big difference.
Yep.
Yeah, bodybuilding should, in the long run, enhance your life and benefit you. There's
Yes.
obviously shortened periods where, things can be a little bit overly restrictive, but at no point should, and this is one of the things I've struggled with as, when people come out online and start, saying that, oh, contest prep is bad for you. It ruins your hormones. It ruins, you get eating disorders. You did it, and I've seen a few of the reels of female competitors talking about that. And as much as I want to, I've never done it, but I just want to leave a comment that says it's not bodybuilding, it's your approach. Whether that was your doing, your coach is doing, there is a way to do bodybuilding and have it be beneficial for your longevity. There is a way to do that. Unfortunately, short timelines, aggressive protocols, aggressive cardio styles, cookie cutter, or even just thoughtless meal plans. These are the tools of problem creation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed this topic. And should we have them comment something below if they listened this far? What should they comment? If they're still listening, what should we have them comment below?
What's your cat doing right now? We gotta.
Comment Queen Pearl.
Yeah, I would say comment Pearl is sleeping, but
Pearl.
he's out. Look at her. Look at that face.
Aww.
He is like, why do you disturb me?
Because she disturbs me all the time.
Aw.
That is a great bed, like attached to the window like that.
It's great,
That is-
right? She loves it.
I love it. Yeah. Well, comment Queen Pearl or Pearl is sleeping. If you've listened this far, we'll know. Yeah. You
I
stuck.
want to see Evan get like one of those staircases that goes around the border of the house. The cat's, you become a crazy cat dad.
Be a crazy cat dad. Yeah,
I would
Love
do it. I freaking love cats. I would do it.
that's best.
Ugh.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for listening to the Pro Physique Code. As always, we'd love to hear your comments and feedback for topics you want to discuss. I think in the week ahead, we're just preparing for, the first couple competitions of the year, which for me are going to be Wasatch. Then I'll be at the Florida Grand Prix in Boca Raton, and then we're all going to be at Pittsburgh.
Mhm.
Yeah. I
For
think
the
Evan and I
first
will be
Power
at
Fit. Is that the Power Fit Expo?
Yeah, Power Fit Expo, May 11th and 12th or 10th and 11th. Yeah, we're all gonna be there, so we're excited.
Let's go.
I may end up being at that bunker show too, Paul. Maybe. We'll see.
Okay. All right.
All right, bye guys.
Bye.